Good morning everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of 2026. And this year is going to be a huge year for managing people, and so we've got a full schedule lined up for the rest of the year that we're going to share with you at the end of today's session. But for today we're going to be focusing on the changes that are coming in April, which relate to statutory sick pay. Before we begin, we would like to introduce ourselves. I'm Victoria Templeton, the HR Knowledge Manager here at HR Solutions, and I'm joined by Sue Watson, who is our Operations Director. And together we're going to guide you through today's topic. Because we've got so many of you with us today, we've placed you all on mute. However, we do want your involvement in today's webinar, and you can get involved in several ways. So first of all, Sue and I are going to be taking your questions on today's topic at the very end of the session. So do please drop us a line with your questions as we take you through this subject. And you'll see on the screen now an image of what your GoToWebinar question panel looks like. So simply type in your question and then we'll aim to read out as many as we can in the time that we have left. So do please take the opportunity to pick our brains on the topic. And the second way in which you can join in our conversation is through the use of polls. So we find that polls not only help us to steer our webinar, but they allow us to also share how the topic is being discussed within other organisations. So it not only helps to share ideas with everyone, but it's always good to know how different aspects of people management are being dealt with elsewhere. So when you see this slide, that means we're going to be running the polls. They are confidential, we only publish the results, so we do welcome as many of you today to share your insights with us and join in the conversation. And finally, now I'm just going to take you through the agenda for the session. And so we'll start off looking at what those changes are going to be regarding the statutory sick pay reforms. Then we're going to consider what it may mean for your business. We'll explore the critical steps that we're advising employers take now in order to prepare for the changes. Remember, we're just 3 months away. And finally, I'm going to take the opportunity just to provide the latest news on the Employment Rights Act and outline the resources that we've got available for you. And then we'll close with taking your questions. And so without further ado, let's begin. And we've got 3 poll questions just to sort of get to know our audience. These are really helpful in forming our webinar discussion. And the first one should be coming up very shortly. And it's just to understand the organisation that you work for.
Yeah, that was launched.
Lovely. Thank you, Sue. As I said, this just helps give us an idea of our audience who are with us today, and it'll help with our conversation.
Okay, I will close and share that result. There we go. So a pretty good split really across the across all of the bands. So yeah, that's really good. Shall I share the next one?
Yeah, please.
And then, so who is responsible for human resource management in your business? Oh, I think they're coming through quicker today.
That's good. This is always an interesting question, isn't it? I think
it is, because it looks like, you know, there is a significant majority that are in-house HR.
Yeah.
And we work a lot with in-house HR teams because obviously we can provide quite a lot of support for them as well. But it's a very lonely place if you're in-house HR and if you're a kind of business owner, office manager, because there is just so much coming up. So, and this is clearly one of the trickiest areas and the most impactful, I think, of the first batch of laws, as we will find. Okay, I will close and share that one.
Okay, lovely.
There we go. So the majority in-house,
Okay, yeah.
and or a standalone. Still quite a significant with business owner and office manager.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so
Brilliant,
I will
thank you.
I think we've got one more here, haven't
Yeah,
we?
one more,
Yep.
and it's really to do with the changes that are coming up and how you feel your organisation is familiar with these changes.
Okay, I will close and share those results. So we have a good split again, but looks like a few people still, quite a lot of people still to be to kind of really prepare for all of this. So yeah, okay.
Yeah, brilliant. That's helpful to know. Thank you, everyone. So let's get going, and we'll begin with taking you through what these changes are going to be. As I said, they're going to come into effect from April. All employers will be affected. And what you'll see here on the screen is there's two elements to the reforms. First of all, the current waiting days that we have will be removed. So a person will no longer have to wait until the 4th day of sickness in order to be paid. It's going to become available from the 1st day of sickness absence. And then second, the current threshold that we use to determine who is eligible to be paid for statutory sick pay, that's going to be removed. So we currently use what's known as the lower earnings limit. The current rate of that is £125 a week. And those who earn on average at least this figure are currently entitled to sick pay. Anybody below that obviously don't. What we'll see from April is that that threshold will be removed, and that means every employee will become eligible for statutory sick pay regardless of their earnings level. And so already I'm sure you can see that's a massive change and significant, because it just broadens the scope as to awarding the SSP. And because of this, we need to have a way of determining how much SSP a low earner will be entitled to. So because we don't have that low earnings threshold and everybody's entitled, we're going to have a new method for calculating SSP. So what we'll see from April is that SSP will be calculated at either the statutory flat rate or 80% of normal weekly earnings, whichever is the lower of those two figures. Now, the new statutory sick pay flat rate that will be coming in from April, because as you know, it changes each year, that's going to be increasing. So currently it's £118.75 a week, but it's going to be increasing to £123.25 a week. That's the proposed figures, and almost certainly they're the figures that will then get to be implemented. So I'm going to take you through a couple of examples to illustrate the reforms. And as you can see on this slide here, the first example, you have an employee whose normal weekly earnings are £100. You need to understand what 80% of their normal weekly earnings are, and so therefore the £80. We know the statutory flat rate for SSP from April is £123.25 a week. So under the new rules, this person would receive £80 in statutory sick pay, because that is the lower than the statutory rate of 123. And in that second example we have here, you have an employee's normal weekly earnings of £200. To understand what 80% of that normal weekly earnings is for that individual, that would be £160. As you know, the statutory flat rate of SSP is going to become £123.25. So this individual would receive the £123.25 a week for their sickness absence, because again, it's the lower figure of the two. It's 80% of their normal weekly earnings. So hopefully that just gives you that clarity as to the changes. As we explore through this webinar, we'll find out more about what that means for businesses and employers. I do want to take the opportunity to pick up on a third aspect of reform under the Employment Rights Act, and that's to do with the Fair Work Agency. So whilst it's not directly an SSP reform, it's more broader, but it's critical that we're aware of it, especially when we look to prepare for April. Because we're going to have a new enforcement body, as I said, known as the Fair Work Agency. The actual full introduction date is not yet known. We do know from April, though, the legal framework will be in place to get it established. Once established, it's going to take on the enforcement of a wide range of employment rights, so not just the payment of SSP. So for instance, it will also have authority to enforce the paying of national minimum pay rates and paid annual leave, for example. But once this new body is in force, it will have powers to inspect workplaces. It can just attend on site and speak to any of your employees. It can require employers to produce relevant documents and evidence to demonstrate compliance with employment law. It will have the power to bring civil proceedings as well, meaning that it can bring proceedings to the employment tribunal on a worker's behalf, and that's whether or not the individual was planning to do so. As a enforcement body, it's going to be looking to offer legal advice and assistance to someone about their civil legal case relating to either employment or trade union laws. And it'll be able to force an employer to correct their behaviour and impose charges to recover enforcement costs from employers against whom enforcement action has been taken for non-compliance. And you know, as you can see on the slide here, they can issue notice of underpayments, as I said, enforce failure to pay certain statutory payments, impose penalties and get court orders to force that payment. But what I do want to just put into perspective is, you know, this government are wanting to address the issues we're seeing with unscrupulous employers. You know, we know the majority of employers, you know, we are trying our best to do what's right for workers, obviously be compliant with all our employment laws, but obviously there will be those employers out there that will be unscrupulous, and that's what the Fair Work Agency are going to, you know, want to be tackling. We think the legislation, as I said, to bring in the new enforcement body comes in from April, but it's going to take time in recruiting board members and teams in order for that body to operate. And certainly this is going to be a topic for one of our webinars in the future, so do keep up to date with our news and updates, because we'll be following that very closely. So let's just now find out, I guess, what everybody's thinking about the reforms that I've just gone through. So we've got 3 poll questions coming up. The first one actually is about, do you already operate enhanced sick pay, company sick pay? Because what we're talking about today is specifically to SSP, but it's useful to know, actually, do employers operate above that and give their own company sick pay in addition?
They're coming through now.
Yep. Lovely.
There's quite a lot of questions coming through, so thank you, everybody. Some of them I think we will be addressing, so
yep.
I'll try and collate them at the end to ask all the ones that we haven't covered. As you can imagine, it's a huge topic, so with lots and lots of questions. I'm just going to close that one and share those results.
Okay.
There we go. So quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And what will be interesting is, just bear in mind as I'm talking through the rest of the session, is you think about how your company sick pay rules operate alongside the statutory rules. And I'll probably be picking up on this more as I take you through. But yeah, that's really interesting, actually, in a high proportion of you that do operate above the statutory sick pay levels. Okay, so let's look at the second poll, and this is more about of those reforms, which will be the most challenging for your business, do you think, to manage? I'm sure perhaps all of these potential options are relevant, but just pick the one that's the most challenging that you see.
I think this could well be one of those webinars where we do a Q&A as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do have a lot of you on the call today, so thank you for joining us. It's a very interesting topic. Okay, I will need that.
Let's see.
Okay, let's close and share those now.
Oh, that was interesting. Nearly joint first for a moment.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
The financial cost, yes. And well, the main one being the tracking and managing high volumes of short-term absence. So yeah, as you can expect, sick pay being day one, it's got to be attracting more short-term absence.
Yeah, that they did keep switching around, didn't they? So I'll hide the last one, and then we'll look at then the next
third poll. Yeah,
progression on that, which is how do you think about absorbing the additional costs?
This is quite an interesting one because, April is a time anyway where other costs increase, your national pay, minimum pay levels, statutory rates, family rates, etc. So actually this is quite a significant question to ask as an organisation, how are we going to absorb, if we are.
Okay, so if I close that poll and share the results.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Right. So that one also fluctuated a lot as we were going through, but yeah, still assessing. I think it's now it's sort of been passed. I think everybody's come out of the will it really come in phase.
It's coming in.
And the reality as we're working through budgets is sort of starting to hit us all, I think, is to work out how on earth do we plan for this, because it is difficult to know without knowing your individual workforces as to what the impact's likely to be, but we can assume it will be significant in some areas. So yeah, okay, I will hide that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Taking part in those. So what I want to do now is just sort of discuss, what it may mean for your own business. From a context point of view, I think it's helpful to consider why these reforms are coming in. And, it's thinking about the government's overall objective, and it's about enhancing financial security for all. We know that there's an imbalance still in society. It's about curbing the spread of workplace illnesses. So it's encouraging people to be off sick. So we know people can fight sickness because they can't afford to not be at work. And therefore, by curbing the spread of workplace illnesses, the government believes that will safeguard productivity. And through their own impact assessments, when they've been developing these reforms, they've actually identified that an estimated 1.3 million individuals currently earn below the lower earnings limit. And so these reforms are going to now mean that those 1.3 million individuals will be getting sick pay. They also found that around 25% of all employees receive only SSP during a period of sickness absence. And so the reforms are going to give these individuals sick pay from day one now, rather than just having to wait for pay from the 4th day of their sickness absence. But I've got a couple of interesting statistics as well to show you from a cost point of view. And we know from the Department for Work and Pensions fact sheet on the statutory sick pay, they're estimating the cost to business of removing the waiting days and the lower earnings limit, replacing it with this 80% calculation rate. It's going to be around an additional 450 million annually to business. But actually, when we delve further, they are also estimating this to be an additional cost of approximately £15 per employee. So they are significant. I'd say it's the biggest change in sickness statutory sick pay in years. We had a slight change during the pandemic, if you remember, with rebates and things like that, but we haven't seen any changes like this in years around the sick pay. So yeah, so from a cost point of view, they're anticipating for employers it's going to be an extra £15 per employee. So I'm going to take you through some ways in which it can impact your own business. So with all employees falling in scope and SSP becoming that day one right, like I said a few moments ago, it naturally is going to lead to an increase in short-term sickness absence. We're going to also have more complexity around the payroll, and that's because of the variable SSP calculation for low earners. So payroll systems must be able to accurately track weekly earnings to be able to apply that 80% calculation and ensure payment doesn't exceed that flat statutory sick pay rate. I think from a wider claim management perspective, you know, we're going to see SSP extended by incorporating an additional 1.3 million workers. So your HR teams are going to need to manage SSP related tribunal claims for a broader pool of employees. It goes without saying that your existing sickness absence policies must be immediately revised to reflect the changes in law. As I said, we're just 3 months away. As well as ensuring your written statement of employment particulars is reflective of the new pay terms and any associated documents that are referred to in that document has to be clearly communicated and readily available to your workforce. Existing sickness absence policies, as I said, must be immediately revised to reflect those changes, and the clear communication to employees is going to be vital. But what we'll also need to consider is the increased eligibility will therefore potentially lead to an increase in short-term absenteeism, and therefore there could be more complications from a workforce planning perspective, staffing levels, shift management. And so that's going to take some employers more of a greater focus for planning their resources. Line managers will require training on new statutory sick pay policies, absence management in general, the new calculation methods, and that's about ensuring consistency, your legal compliance, but also to minimise the level of absenteeism. You know, that good absence management policy and your procedures that are effectively trained out are a massive contributing factor to help drive down sickness rates. And obviously I've mentioned the Fair Work Agency. So SSP is one of those enforcement areas brought under the Fair Work Agency, and it's going to mean that employers are going to have robust procedures in place, line managers trained, as I said a moment ago, and actually you've got accurate and full records kept of absence management. From a reporting requirement, as I said a second ago, accurate records are going to be critical for the potential workplace inspections by the Fair Work Agency and or HMRC. and auditing and oversight is essential. HR teams are going to need to implement new internal checks. You're going to need to make sure your workplace processes for managing absence are robust, because ultimately having that all established will help with the compliance with the updated SSP rules. And then if we think about productivity benefits, whilst there are many challenges that I've just gone through on this slide here, and obviously the cost implications, it is expected that employers will benefit from increased productivity because of the day one payment rule changes. You know, if we think back to the government's objective of enhancing financial security for all, curbing the spread of workplace illnesses, and therefore safeguarding productivity, the hope is that reducing that absenteeism in your workplace, because people are getting paid, will therefore limit the spread of infectious diseases, and you're going to have those more productivity as a result of that. So these were just our thoughts on how the changes can impact the business. Obviously every business is different, so let's just see what everybody is thinking from your own workplace. And the first one is really, what is your primary concern regarding the removal of the 3-day waiting period?
Just because we're getting a slight delay in the results coming through, I'm loading them up as quick as I can, the actual question. So apologies if Victoria hasn't quite introduced it yet, but I'm doing it just to give you the chance to participate. And it looks like they're all coming through. They all come through at once then. So I'm going to close and share that whole result.
Yeah.
So there we go.
So what do we have?
So the biggest one is the increase in non-genuine short-term absence.
Yeah, and it comes back to having really robust absence procedures, isn't it, on that? And you know, return to work interviews, for example, that's a classic. It's one of the most important tools you can use for tackling and keeping absence to a minimum.
Yeah.
So then we've got the, followed by the no major concern to offering sick pay anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. And then the second question is around the support that you think is going to be most valuable to your organisation in preparing for these changes.
Yeah, it's really
there's a lot to think about.
And we've already started looking, haven't we, at our own templates, and it's quite surprising how many sections actually need rewording just because of this change. If you do have company sick pay, then I guess it's slightly easier in some ways, in that if you already pay from day one and you already enhance from day one, and you've already got management processes in place because of that.
Yeah. The thing I would say on the company sick pay is, and I think we come on to it shortly, is you've got to really examine the wording of your policy. And if, for example, it's worded in a way that we follow our company sick pay is in line with the statutory sick pay rules. So up to now, you've been paying the company sick pay potentially from the 4th day onwards. But now with these reforms, changing the SSP rules for day one, having wording like that in your policy will naturally therefore mean your company sick pay is from the day one. So it could be straightforward, or it might be an added complication.
Might have some yeah, okay. So I'm just sharing the results of that poll. It's a lot of it, yeah, the templates and the training.
Yeah.
as we probably would expect. But yeah, it's there's a lot. And managers do absolutely need to know, so they don't inadvertently cause you any problems by incorrectly reporting or notifying, or managing, incorrectly managing the situation.
And there's one thing I just want to touch on, because I noticed 31% of you are indicating the legal compliance checklists for contract variations. I think if, as part of your preparation for the SSP reforms, it's leading your business to think about you actually need to change your current way of paying for sick pay. I'm thinking more about those that offer the company sick pay. You are better to do sooner rather than later, make any changes to your rules, because come October, it's going to be virtually impossible to change key contractual terms of your employment contracts. So whilst you're preparing for your SSP changes, just in the back of your mind, think about if you're going to need to change your rules because of an affordability issue, for example, you need to make the changes now, sooner rather than later. As I said, because from October, it'll be very difficult for you to push through any change.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go through now, thinking about the critical steps employees should be taking really at this point. And I think the first thing really for me to say is impact assessments. These are going to be a business critical tool. It's probably one of the most important actions on the to-do list. It's essentially a deep dive analysis of understanding how the SSP changes could impact your business operations. So not just how it impacts on your people practices, but more broadly. And if we think back to one of those earlier poll questions, how are you going to absorb the additional costs? This is a classic example of how an impact assessment could work. So as part of doing your impact assessment, you need to think about, A, are we going to absorb the cost or not? If we aren't, how are we going to deal with those extra costs? Are we going to pass it on to our customers through our services? And so it's working out how you're going to manage that strategic change so it has the minimum amount of impact on wider business operations, because it may mean you have to change your sales strategy if you're having to do price increases, for example. So your impact assessment is a brilliant tool to help you think more broadly outside from the people perspective. It'll get you thinking about your IT systems, marketing, as I said, the sales strategy, and obviously people as well. But yes, that would be the first thing that I would strongly recommend that you start undertaking now if you haven't already. The second aspect is about a workplace audit. So thoroughly review all your employee handbooks, the contracts of employment, workers' agreements, internal policies. It's making sure all the language is updated to reflect the new regulations, because you need to be ready for April and in the future for any inspection by the Fair Work Agency. Assess any occupational sick pay schemes. So I sort of touched on this a moment ago. So review how your enhanced schemes align with the new statutory minimums. If your occupational sick pay scheme previously mirrored the SSP, then assess the financial viability of having day one payments. Make decisions about if your scheme will now act as a top-up after a certain duration of absence, or whether you can continue as is, or you need to change the way in which it operates entirely. And as I said a minute ago, if you're going to need to make any changes, we would strongly recommend you make changes to any occupational sick pay before October, because from October it's going to be hard to push through any change. And that's all to do with the reform coming in further down the line about fire and rehire. Recalculate budgets. So adjust your budgets, because you're going to need to account for the cost of covering short-term absences. So we know day 1 to 3 are now going to be paid sickness, and the inclusion of part-time or low earning employees. So we know that across the UK, 1.3 million people are going to be available to eligible to get sick pay. So while average estimates suggest an increase of £15 per head, expect higher costs if you have higher turnover or low wage sectors, if you operate in a high turnover or low wage sectors. And then revise and update key employment documentation, update the written statement of employment particulars. You need to be making sure you're specific on your sick pay details. Any details that are housed in a separate document, then you've got to ensure it's legally accessible and communicated to staff within the required statutory time frame. So there's a lot of contractual law that will need to be, you need to bear in mind while you're looking at your contractual documents. Line management training is critical and fundamental, not just for protecting the business from any penalties through the Fair Work Agency, you know, for non-compliance, but actually for driving down sickness absence levels and keeping it to a minimum. Make sure training is always targeted. It deals with the day one rights. It's clear on how the new calculation methods are used. Because also what that training will do will also ensure consistent application of your policy, which is critical for any employment policy. Then think about your payroll systems and your working processes that accompany that. So coordinate with your payroll provider to ensure software can process that new 80% calculation. It can handle linked absences and account for the removal of the lower earnings limit and the waiting days. I think a good message, more of a best practice rather than a really critical, and that's about reviewing health and wellbeing support. And I'm recommending this because we need to think about how to keep absence to a minimum. If we are anticipating absence levels to increase because pay is now from day one, then start thinking about proactive health initiatives. By providing better wellbeing support, it means management can help reduce overall absenteeism, which directly therefore mitigates the increased costs that we're going to see and any productivity losses associated with the new rules from absenteeism. And then the work that we need to do, we need to have in mind the Fair Work Agency, because we've got to prepare for when that is a body that's going to be starting to take enforcement measures. As I said, they're going to have powers to inspect records, attend sites, speak to all employees, introduce fines for non-compliance. So your robust record keeping responsibilities are essential, and verify all your contractual documentation is accurate and transparent, and ultimately the employees are being paid in line with the new rules. And what I would say is also bear in mind that the Fair Work Agency will be able to bring a tribunal claim on behalf of an individual, even if the individual wasn't planning to. You know, that is a significant development under this new, under these reforms. And then communicate with staff. So it's important to draft and distribute clear updates to all your employees. Transparency is vital. It's about explaining their rights and reiterate the company's expectations for sickness reporting. All of these measures are critical for maintaining manageable absence levels. So it's quite a detailed and lengthy action plan. We've only got 3 months left to bring these changes in. So there's a lot of work to do. Hopefully what I've gone through there is giving you those pointers to get started. I will come on to explaining various resources we've got that will be able to help you alongside doing these. But what I thought I would do now is actually just flag what the latest is in regards to the General Employment Rights Act of 2025. Because whilst this is a massive change, SSP is just one of many, and the SSP is coming in April, but so are, I think, 8 or 9 other reforms, and then we've got October, and then we've got next year. So what I'm going to be doing at the end of every webinar is just bring you the latest quick update on where we are in general with the reforms. And I think the first thing to say is just before Christmas, on the think the 18th of December, the bill, what was known as the Employment Rights Bill, became an act of law, and it is now known as the Employment Rights Act of 2025. The government already communicated last summer its roadmap for implementation. So the 30 odd reforms we're going to see aren't coming in one go, thankfully. So phase one, we've actually seen something happen already, and it probably hasn't impacted any of you, and that was the Strikes Minimum Service Levels Act that was brought in back in 2023 is no longer in force. It was repealed as soon as the act came into force. If you are unionised, obviously I'm assuming you've already been briefed and aware of this anyway, but essentially the certain public sectors no longer need to have minimum service levels when there's strike action. For the majority of us, these following phases are critical. So phase two, actually, we've got some reforms coming in next month, and they are specific to trade union reforms. So again, if you are unionised, then these are going to be impacting you. And there's several, and it's more of a practical way in which strike action happens, balance of the ballots. There's quite a few. There's several changes, probably off the top of my head, thinking about 10 practical changes there. But the big reform, batch of reforms, will be April. That's phase three, and we're going to see 8 reforms, including the statutory sick pay ones. So it is an extremely busy and pressurised time for employers. Come October, we'll see another 10 reforms introduced, and then next year and beyond, there's a further 11. So it's striking how significant and scary it is that we've got this time frame, which is why I wanted to share with you kind of the resources and support that we've got and what we're working on to help organisations introduce and comply. So I think the first thing I wanted to just share, if you're on this call today and you have membership to our online portal known as the HR Knowledge Base, you will be seeing over the next few weeks and months the updated contract templates that, as you know, we store on there. We have our checklists, letters, forms, policies, you name it. They will be launched onto the portal ready for April. Of course, if you've got trade union recognition in your workplace, we are updating those as well, ready for the February reforms. But you'll also find over the 600 employment guidance and articles and the latest how-to on the entire employment life cycle and best practice guides. So there's a lot of information out there, particularly around absenteeism, trying to manage absence and keeping it to a minimum. So that's if you're one of our knowledge-based members. Check out that. And then in terms of general support that we have available to everyone, we've got several tools. So we're offering our impact assessment templates. You'll find those online on our HR Solutions website. We also operate a risk audit, online risk audit. It's entirely free. It takes probably 10-15 minutes of your time, and it just gives you that sense check in terms of how your processes are compliant now to existing employment law. And as we obviously get nearer to April, it'll be ready for the April changes. We offer our free events, as you know, throughout the year. We have webinars each month, and then every March we've got an annual employment law virtual seminar. So we are going to be running that in March. And we are also offering a link to a free 30-minute consultation, so with one of our experienced HR professionals. So do check that out on our website as well. And we can get in contact with you to help with that free 30-minute consultation. And I would say just follow us on our social pages. We're always sharing the breaking news, providing general updates. Because we really appreciate that for all organisations, particularly SMEs, that don't necessarily have all the support in-house, it's about helping each other. So do follow us on socials to stay up to date. And of course, we'd love you to keep in touch with us as well. So there's some here listed ways in which you can contact us, follow us on LinkedIn. It's always great to have you keep in touch with us. And a really big part of our service each month is to run our webinars. So we are going to be refining this schedule further in terms of dates, times, but essentially what we're looking to cover throughout the rest of this year and beyond are things that are going to be pivotal for employers to implement. So there will be webinar and information on the Fair Work Agency once we know more and once it gets nearer to implementation. The fire and rehire that I mentioned earlier, that is a massive change happening in October. So there'll be content in terms of webinars on that. We're looking at pay and reward. If you think about tipping, if you're working hospitality, then we have tipping laws that are going to be changing. You name it, there's a lot of change coming ahead. And even if you think about the harassment, prevention of harassment duty, that's changing again in October. Trade unions, the whole industrial relations are reforming. So these are key areas we're going to be focusing on for our webinars. So it's really important that you do follow us on socials and sign up to our newsletters, because then you get to know when the dates are promoted. Now, I mentioned we run an annual virtual employment law seminar. So we've got our one for 2026 on the 12th of March. It's a couple of hours. We have a panel of guests where we talk through, as the title suggests, critical employment law information. So everything that's going to be coming through with the reforms, health and safety changes will be coming in, you name it. We'll be talking perhaps about significant case rulings as well, because we can't forget there's significant case rulings that are also getting implemented that we have to be mindful of. So do register for our free event, and as I said, there'll be a panel of experts there to take you through the employment landscape for the year ahead. So before we get to questions, we've just got a couple of quick polls, and then we've got a good amount of time for questions, which is good. And this is really about any support and information that you feel you'd like to receive from us regarding our services in the future. So Sue, I can't see if the poll is launching.
Yes, it's launched. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, so do let us know.
Yeah, because obviously the updates to all of our templates, we're currently in the process of finalising those, and then for all those of you who are clients, there is a programme about to be launched for updating all the documents, all your documents, so that is imminent. That's one of the questions we've had actually.
Oh, brilliant.
For some clients on the call. So yes, the programme is about to be launched. We've been waiting for, well, obviously waiting for the final details so that we could be sure we were updating everything we needed to. That process has happened now, and so we are just literally planning everything and how we're going to do it and how we're going to achieve it as efficiently as possible. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of changes, not just these, so it is a pretty significant program we are working on. And this just helps us, how can we help you in progressing it as well. Okay, shall I just load up the other one?
Yeah.
And then the other one is, oh, there we go. It's just if you'd like us to contact you, obviously you're welcome to contact us, but if you'd like us to get one of the team to contact you to arrange something or to send you some information, just let us know. I can see there's lots and lots of questions. I'm just trying to group them, so we will come to those shortly. After this. And
it may be I do, like you suggested, a Q&A afterwards. It's a written document.
Yeah,
to
a written Q&A, just to summarise them, I guess. There are a lot on the same themes, so we will pull definitely the ones where there's a significant number of you asking this similar type of question. So I'll try and cover some of those off with Victoria shortly. Okay, I will close that one off and we can move on to the next bit.
Yeah. Are we ready for the, for the
Yes, are
question?
you ready?
Are we ready? I think we are.
Yeah. So the first one is to clarify the period of incapacity for work. So some people are saying, do they still have to have a period of incapacity of work of 4 days, but you just pay them from day one? Or is that gone completely?
You pay from day one.
So if they're off for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, you would still pay them from day one. They don't have to have, you don't have the period of incapacity for work in terms of the 4 day.
No.
The 4 day aspect of it is gone. Obviously, you'll still get the linked ones that we were talking about yesterday, weren't we, Victoria? You still have linked period of incapacities of work when they are off sick, and then within 8 weeks they're off sick again. But there's no longer the requirement for it to be a minimum of 4 days to form a period of incapacity of work. Is that right?
Yeah, the waiting days are being removed.
Yeah. So that could also cause some challenges, I guess, if people go off, come back, go off, come back.
Yeah. Which is why we're anticipating increased sickness levels, because it's going to increase.
Because of that, and more management time in managing it because of keeping ahead of it. So that leads to the other piece is people are asking about documentation and authorization. And so what some of the questions are around, if somebody's off for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, they won't be able to get a doctor's note. What should we be requiring in order to pay the SSP from day one?
Self-certification forms. So the reporting side isn't changing. The normal practice of any absence up to the length of 7 consecutive calendar days remains. They can self-certify. So if you have your own templates in place to facilitate that, they'll fill in that form, and that's them certifying I've been sick and pay me please. And the fit note kicks in from the 8th consecutive calendar day onwards. Nothing's changing on that.
But I'm guessing if people haven't bothered with a self-certification process, they're probably going to have to implement one in order to have an audit trail that they're paying sickness fairly. Because otherwise, how are you going to evidence that it was a genuine sickness? And if you do want to manage it, which you're likely to have to manage it more, you will need them to confirm that it was genuine sickness, and hence that you've referred to having the return to work interviews is going to become more and more important.
And just interestingly, as it is now, eligibility entitlement for SSP, there's many things, obviously the waiting days and all that, but following notification procedures is one element. So if you haven't got any rules or workplace practice in place as to what employees need to do to notify and form filling, now is the time to do it. Because if they're not compliant with your own processes, potentially there may be circumstances where you think, actually, no, I'm withholding it because you've not fulfilled our policy obligations.
Without good reason. And in fact, that was another question I was sort of trying to clarify myself was, can you reasonably refuse, because I was asked it, can you reasonably refuse to pay SSP if you don't believe, if they've not followed any process, they haven't rung you and they haven't refused to complete forms, then yes, you can, as long as it's in your process and in your policy, and that you don't just introduce it for one, you do it for everyone.
Obviously you need to investigate and come to a good reason as to why you're believing that, but in theory, potentially, yes, you've got that avenue.
And that's in the legislation, isn't it? It's
Yeah, yeah, you can
reasonable
withhold it, but yeah,
for reasonable, if within reason you can withhold it.
yeah,
And for failure to follow process
yeah,
unreasonably. Obviously, if they have been in an accident or something, and that's the reason they haven't, then that wouldn't be reasonable to withhold. But
no,
once you're aware of the full reasons, if it's just a genuine refusal to comply, then that you can take more action. And then there's a lot of questions around what about employees who work variable hours, or are casual employees, or what do you base the payment on?
right, okay. So this is never a straightforward thing to get your head around, but somebody that doesn't have a regular set of working hours, when it comes to pay, the Employment Rights Act sets out a formula. And that formula is about looking back a period of 52 weeks and looking at their earnings over that period of time to find what their average earnings are. So you're going to still have to adopt, as you're adopting now, that method, that calculation method to work out what their average earnings are. Once you've got that figure, you then need to consider, do I pay 80% or do I pay the flat rate? What's the lower figure?
Yeah.
So it's a bit more of a complication to just any other kind of employment type, because you have to do your 52 calculation first to find the average earnings.
And I guess if they've been employed less than 52 weeks, then you just base it on what you can, even if it's day one, I guess. This is day one, right? So they'll be able to be eligible for day one potentially.
And just to clarify, that's not a new method. It's already in place now. So if you're employing irregular hours workers, your processes hopefully are reflective of that process, particularly when you calculate holiday pay.
Yeah.
That same method.
And then somebody was saying, who applies for the SSP payment, the employee or the employer? Well, it's paid through the pay slip as normal. So the employer pays it. And yeah, you do have to pay sick pay for a single day sickness. No length of service required for SSP for them to be eligible. So the questions are quite similar. There are so many of them. I'm just trying to see if there's some more. So yeah, that's variable hours. Will the Fair Work Agency be able to look at retrospective details? I guess they will, in terms of has it been calculated correctly, they would look at, and I would guess, but whether they would, you still have the time limits of bringing claims, don't you? So
I suspect that it won't be from that point onwards, from when they're enforced. I think, like you say, you can bring a lawful deduction of wages claims going back, can't you?
Yeah. So the current rules aren't changing, are they, on that? But it's just who will be able to enforce it.
And we need further details. We know that they've appointed a chair and they're just in the process of recruiting board members. But that will be what they will need to determine, the actual rules and operation practices.
And they do say they are going to recruit sufficient people across the country to be able to enforce it. So watch this space. Does this mean our company sick pay needs to be paid from day one also? Well, you can have other company sick pay rules, can't you? If it's currently different, as long as you pay SSP from day one.
Yeah, I would just say check the wording of the contract and your policy. And like I gave that example earlier in the webinar, if it says something along the lines of, we pay company sick pay of normal pay for 3 weeks, whatever, but it follows the rules of SSP. Well, the SSP rules are changing. So if up to now you've only been paying company sick pay from the 4th day onwards, the impact for you would be actually it's from day one. So it does depend on how you've worded it in your contract and policy. So just double check that.
Yeah.
But it might be a good opportunity anyway to look at your company sick pay scheme, even if it operates along different rules to the SSP rules, because if there now becomes an affordability issue just through other reforms coming in or just because increased absence, then like I say, it's better now to change any scheme now rather than pushing it down the line, because from October it will be virtually impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody's asked for clarification why October. By the way, I've just read that.
Oh yeah, okay. So we've got several reforms coming in October, one of which is the banning of fire and rehire practices. So at the moment, if you're wanting to change contractual term, employers generally have a framework in which they can do it fairly and reasonably and enforce a change, and they can basically end the existing contract and issue a new one for the individual with that new change in. But what will happen from October is if you're not getting agreement to the change, if you end that contract and reissue a new one, it will automatically be an unfair dismissal, no matter what approach. And so that's why we're saying if you've got any contractual changes, anything, it might not be SSP, it might be other enhanced benefits you offer that you've put in that are contractual. If you think there's going to be a need to change those terms, do it sooner rather than later, because it will be virtually impossible. Because people aren't going to agree to having their sick pay cut, generally, really. And so you won't get their agreement. And therefore, if you try and enforce it and push through a new contract, they'll have grounds to claim that automatic unfair dismissal, which I think warrants another webinar.
I think it does, because I mean, I
That's
think
why October.
yeah, I mean, and that would, I think we will be covering that off anyway in detail, a bit closer to that, because throughout all of our webinars we're trying to alert you to the forthcoming ones, because there are implications for as we can see here, there's implications for this change with the later ones, in that you might want to make some changes sooner rather than later. But when those come in, that will be quite significant. So we are trying to hold it sufficiently in advance, but when we've actually got all the details we need to give you everything that you need to be able to implement it fairly. So somebody said they make sickness deductions 1 month in arrears. I'm assuming that's when they pay them. Am I right in thinking that the day one SSP will be implemented in May for our colleagues? You might be paying it in May, but they will still be eligible for day one from April. So any sickness in April you would have to pay from day one.
Any absence in April, any absence in April, they are entitled to SSP from day one. You then process it, but they'll see it in the May
pay.
Yeah.
It depends on how soon in the month it is and cut-offs and things like that. I appreciate sickness is always a difficult one, especially when it's after a cut-off day for payroll as well. But yes, any entitlements will be from April, but you may be doing the payment adjustments in May. If contracts already say SSP, do we need to reword anything to relate to the 80% calculation? I guess it depends on the other wording, doesn't it?
It does depend on the other wording around it. If it's limited as to what you say there, it means you're obviously referring to another document alongside the written statement, in which case it'll have to be in there. So you will need to be explicit in how it's calculated. And I believe you're entitled under the Employment Rights Act to refer within the written statement to another document. But
SSP,
there's a legal requirement to ensure that it's easily accessible by everyone, and is understood and can be obtained, basically. But you will have to be explicit.
Yeah, absolutely. So if an employee receives regular overtime, does this get included in the 80% calculation? I guess
Right,
it's normal
okay,
pay,
so
normal pay calculations again, isn't it?
It's the phrasing is normal
Pay.
weekly hours, normal weekly pay.
Yeah, so if it's normal for them to receive overtime,
Yeah,
then I think you are probably likely to have to include it. It's a common question in several things, isn't it? Like family leave and things like that, and holidays. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be a similar thing, I think. What is normal for them? But I think we've literally, there are still lots and lots of questions, but I think we've already overrun. So I think if we call it now, we will follow up with any that are new that we haven't covered in the webinar or haven't covered in the questions today. Then we will draw up a Q&A and we send it around to all of you in the next few days. But we do thank you for some really, really good questions. So thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, that was really good, those questions. So on that note, it just leaves me to say thank you for everybody for taking the time out of your busy schedules, for hanging around these extra 10 minutes. We're always pleased to have you join us on our webinars. Don't forget to follow us on socials, sign up to our next webinars, and yeah, thank you. And thank you to Sue for your help in running today's session. So have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.